A billionaire CEO spots his ex on the street with three identical boys that look just like him. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. Under the unrelenting blaze of a New York summer sun, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm. Horns blaring, tourists meandering, and Wall Street wolves barking into Bluetooths. But for Nathan Cole, a billionaire tech mogul returning from 6 years abroad, the chaos faded beneath a single life-altering sight. Three identical little boys, and the woman he once loved, standing in front of a Starbucks, trying to wave down an Uber. He froze mid-step, not because of the heat or jet lag, but because each boy, laughing and tumbling over each other like puppies, bore a face that might as well have come from his own childhood photo album. The same almond eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same smirk he gave investors just before sealing a billion-dollar deal. And the woman, Elena, looking tired, older, and still devastatingly familiar. She was juggling bags of groceries, brushing hair out of her eyes, her voice calm but firm as she called out the names of the boys. Luca, hands off the curb. Eli, not so fast. Jonah, wait for your brothers. That voice. It hit him like a lightning strike. It wasn't just recognition. It was a rupture. A crack in everything he thought he knew about his life. Nathan had always planned his world down to the minute, down to the decimal, down to the final bullet point of every quarterly projection. And yet, nothing in his precise, calculated world had prepared him for this. He took a step closer, then another, his breath shallow, heart racing. Not from panic, but from the sudden realization that everything was about to change. Elena turned. Her eyes met his. Her mouth opened slightly, then tightened into a line. The shock between them was so thick it could have stopped time. He gestured, voice barely working. Are they? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was staring him in the face. Triple fold. 6 years. 6 years without a word. And now, 3 reasons why. A black Toyota pulled up to the curb. The boys scrambled in with the same energy he used to have after winning a game of stickball in Brooklyn. Elena paused, pulled a receipt from her purse, scribbled something, and walked over. Tomorrow. Lennox Cafe. Noon. If you want answers. Then she climbed in, and the car pulled away, leaving Nathan alone on the sidewalk, his entire world tilting beneath his Italian loafers. He looked down at the crumpled receipt in his hand. 3 sons, 3 strangers, 3 chances at redemption, and a past that refused to stay buried. Sometimes, the biggest twist in life doesn't come from a boardroom coup or a hostile takeover. Sometimes, it hits you with a child's laugh that sounds eerily like your own. And when it does, your billion-dollar empire means absolutely nothing. If you want to know what happened next, if you want to see how a man who thought he had everything discovers the one thing he truly missed, then stay with us. Because this story, it's only just begun. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the rest of this incredible journey. It's one you won't forget. The next morning arrived like a storm Nathan hadn't prepared for. His penthouse, usually a haven of quiet confidence and glass and steel luxury, felt suddenly too large, too sterile, too far removed from the world he was about to walk back into. The note was still on his nightstand, Elena's handwriting, hasty but unmistakable. Lennox Cafe. Noon. He hadn't slept. He'd paced the marbled floor, sat in the dark, staring at the city lights, and replayed every moment of the day before in his mind, like it was a memory from someone else's life. 3 boys, his boys, and Elena, the woman he'd once believed would be his forever, until he'd walked away. Until ambition had pulled him to Tokyo, to Berlin, to Dubai, to everything but her. At 11:30 a.m., Nathan was already at Lennox Cafe. The spot was tucked into a quiet block of Harlem, far from the sleek restaurants and VIP lounges he was used to. No paparazzi here, just real people, and now real consequences. He sat at a corner table, nursing a black coffee he hadn't touched. Every time the door opened, his heart leapt, then sank. But at exactly noon, she walked in. Elena hadn't changed so much as she had deepened. There were new lines near her eyes, earned from worry, not age. Her hair was tied back, her clothes simple. Still, she walked like someone with pride, with weight. She spotted him immediately, nodded once, and slid into the seat across from him. Neither spoke for a long moment. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. Nathan cleared his throat, then shook his head. "I haven't stopped thinking about them, about you. Elena, are they mine?" She exhaled slowly. "Luca, Eli, and Jonah. They're yours, Nathan, all 3. The air rushed from his lungs. He knew it, but hearing it confirmed felt like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena's eyes flashed. "You think I didn't try? I called. I emailed. I came to your office. Your assistants blocked me at every turn. You were in Tokyo by then, off the grid. And when I finally got word back, it was from someone on your team telling me you were too busy for personal matters." Nathan looked away, shame rising fast. "I was stupid, obsessed with building something bigger than myself. I thought I had time, thought I could circle back one day. I didn't know. I stopped trying," she continued, her voice softer now. "I realized if you weren't ready to hear from me then, you wouldn't be ready to be a father either. And I wasn't going to beg." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Elena, I'm here now. I want to know them. I want to be in their lives." She studied him for a long beat. "Wanting is easy. Showing up? That's harder. I'll show up. I don't want child support, Nathan. I don't want some billionaire's guilt money wrapped up in holiday cards and trust funds. I've raised them this far. I'm not looking for a rescue." "I'm not offering a rescue," he said quickly. "I'm asking for a chance." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "They don't know about you. They think you're just someone I knew once. I didn't want them wondering why their father never came back. So I told them their father was a traveler, a man who went off to build something important, but who wasn't coming back." Her voice cracked, just slightly. Nathan reached across the table, not to touch her, but to close the distance somehow. "Let me come back now. Let me try." A silence stretched between them. "I'm not saying yes," she said finally. "But there's a parent-teacher picnic this Saturday. Prospect Park, 1 p.m. The boys will be there. Come if you mean it." Nathan nodded, heart thundering. "I'll be there. Don't be late," she said, standing. "They've had enough disappointment to last a lifetime." As she walked away, the weight of the moment settled over Nathan like a second skin. There would be no shortcuts, no mergers, no buyouts that could fix this. No check he could write to balance out 6 lost years. This was a different kind of investment, one with no guarantees, one that required more than money. This time, he'd have to earn everything. And for the first time in his life, he knew it would be worth it. Saturday arrived with a nervous energy Nathan couldn't shake. He was early, too early, and ended up walking laps around the edge of Prospect Park, trying to calm the quiet chaos in his chest. For years, he'd been the man with the answers, the man with the plan. But now, he was just a man with 3 gift bags, an awkward smile, and a desperate hope to not mess this up. When he finally spotted the gathering across the grass, folding chairs, blankets, balloons waving lazily in the breeze, he felt the edges of panic tug at him again. Parents mingled in clusters. Kids chased soccer balls and bubbles. And then, through the crowd, he saw them, 3 boys, identical, unmistakable. They stood beside Elena, who was setting up a picnic blanket with the same calm grace that used to ground him all those years ago. One boy was adjusting the brim of his cap. Another was pointing excitedly at something in the distance, and the third knelt to tie a shoe. Their faces, though still soft with childhood, carried the sharp definition of his own reflection. Nathan took a breath and walked forward. Elena saw him first. Her eyes widened slightly, not surprised, but wary. She gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that this was his chance and nothing more. No safety net. The boys turned when she called their names. Luca, Eli, Jonah. This is Nathan, a friend of mine. He came to say hello. 3 sets of eyes met his. Curious, guarded, silent. "Hey there," Nathan said, crouching to their level. "I brought a little something for each of you. Just a hello gift." He held out the bags. The boys glanced at Elena, who gave a nod. Slowly, they stepped forward, each taking one. Nathan had chosen carefully. Luca received a Lego space shuttle, Eli a hardcover book on volcanoes, and Jonah a paint set with a tiny fold-out easel. Their reactions were quiet but unmistakable. Surprise, interest, maybe the faintest flicker of delight. "You remembered," Elena murmured beside him, watching as the boys examined their gifts. "I listened," Nathan replied, his voice low. "You said Luca was obsessed with space. Eli's the science mind. Jonah, the artist. I wanted to get it right." "You did," she said, not unkindly. "But a good gift is only the first move." "Understood." A group of parents began gathering near the small playground where the kids were supposed to line up for a 3-legged race. Elena gently touched each boy's shoulder, ushering them toward the activity. Nathan stepped back, uncertain of his place now. "Come on," Elena said. "You're here. Be here." So he followed, and watched, and cheered louder than any of the other parents as Jonah, teamed up with Luca, stumbled across the finish line with wild laughter and grass-stained knees. Eli, ever the strategist, coached another pair from the sidelines, calling out angles and advice with the confidence of a seasoned professor. Later, as the group broke up for snacks, Nathan found himself sitting cross-legged on the grass beside them. The boys munched on sandwiches, too tired from play to guard their words as closely as before. "Are you going to be around more?" Luca asked suddenly, licking jelly off his fingers. The question hit hard, and Nathan didn't hesitate. "If you'll have me, yeah. I'd like to be." "Do you live nearby?" Jonah asked, dipping a carrot into hummus with an artist's precision. "I used to live far away, but I moved back now. For good." What do you do? Eli asked. His eyes narrowing slightly, Nathan chuckled. I run a company. We make software for hospitals. But I think being here is the most important job I'll ever have. The boys went quiet, each processing the answer in their own way. Elena sat a few feet away, watching without interfering. Her posture was still, but Nathan could feel the tension. The wall she'd spent 6 years building weren't going to crumble in a single afternoon. After the picnic ended, Nathan offered to help pack up. He folded blankets, tossed juice boxes, and carried the cooler back to Elena's car without needing to be asked. As she closed the trunk, Elena turned to him. They're curious, not sold, but you showed up. That counts. Can I see them again? They have a library trip next Wednesday, after school. We walk there. Nathan nodded, heart pounding with the tentative rhythm of a man who knew what was at stake. I'll be there. This wasn't a reunion. It wasn't a fairy tale moment. But it was something else. A beginning. And this time, Nathan knew better than to take beginnings for granted. Wednesday afternoon arrived with the golden hush of late autumn in Brooklyn. The air was crisp, and fallen leaves danced in spirals across the sidewalk as school let out. Nathan leaned against a lamppost near the entrance to PS 141, clutching a book under one arm and trying not to look too much like a man who was terrified of doing something wrong. He spotted them instantly. 3 matching backpacks bobbing in unison as Luca, Eli, and Jonah emerged through the school gates with their class. Elena was there too, her presence as steadying as ever. She caught sight of Nathan and offered a small nod, more familiar now, but still cautious. Hey, he greeted as they reached him. I thought we could walk together. I brought something for the library. The boys looked at the book in his hands. Astrophysics for Young Minds. He offered it to Eli, who accepted it without a word, but flipped immediately to the table of contents. Luca was already walking ahead, bouncing a bit with energy. Jonah glanced up at Nathan and asked, Do they have art books at the library? Lots, Nathan replied, but I thought I might show you my favorite corner. You have a favorite corner? Jonah looked skeptical. Back table, near the window, best light in the whole place. Elena stayed a few steps behind, letting them lead. Nathan walked with them in quiet rhythm, answering their questions when they came, letting the silences linger when they didn't. The library was warm and inviting, the kind of place that smelled faintly of old pages and fresh coffee from the cafe attached to the entrance. The boys peeled off in different directions the moment they walked through the door. Eli made a beeline for the science shelves. Jonah wandered toward the art section, his fingers brushing the spines of large illustrated books. Luca drifted for a moment, then trailed after a shelf of adventure novels. Nathan followed slowly, resisting the urge to hover. He sat at the long window table and let them explore. After a few minutes, Eli returned with 2 books in his arms. I found this one about volcanoes, he said, holding it out. It has pictures from Iceland. Nice pick, Nathan said. Did you know Iceland has over 100 volcanoes? Eli raised an eyebrow. How many have erupted in the last 50 years? Nathan grinned. 14. Ask me how I know. Because you Googled it on the way here? Eli deadpanned. Nathan laughed out loud. Guilty. Still cool, Eli said, sliding into the seat next to him. A few minutes later, Luca appeared holding Hatchet by Gary Paulson. My teacher said I'd like this one, he said, holding it out for Nathan's approval. That's a great book, Nathan said. It was one of my favorites growing up. Luca hesitated. Can you read it with me? The question startled Nathan. in the best way. I'd love to. You want to start now? Luca nodded, and together they flipped to page 1. Jonah joined last, his arms full of oversized art books, one balancing precariously on top. He plopped them down on the table without a word and opened to a page with Van Gogh's Starry Night. Nathan didn't interrupt. He just watched him quietly, amazed by the concentration on the boy's face. They spent nearly an hour there, occasionally talking, more often reading in companionable silence. Nathan felt something shift, not in a grand, cinematic way, but a subtle realignment, like the weight in the room had changed. He wasn't a guest anymore. Not fully a fixture, not yet, but something closer to familiar. As the sun dipped toward the horizon and shadows grew longer across the bookshelves, Elena approached the table. Time to go, boys. There was a quiet chorus of reluctant shuffles and closed books. Jonah carefully marked his place. Luca tucked Hatchet under his arm. Eli gave the science section one last glance. Outside, the wind had picked up. As they started walking again, Jonah tugged at Nathan's sleeve. Do you have a favorite painting? Nathan thought for a second. Probably The Persistence of Memory by Salvador Dali. The one with the melting clocks. That's weird, Jonah said thoughtfully. I like weird. Nathan smiled. Me too. They walked the rest of the way in that easy, winding kind of conversation kids have when they're starting to feel safe. When they reached their block, Elena paused at the corner. This was good, she said. Thank you for being patient, for not pushing. I'm not going anywhere, Nathan replied. I just want them to know they can trust that. She nodded, and for the first time, she didn't look like she was bracing for impact. As they reached the steps to her brownstone, Jonah turned and looked up at Nathan. Next week. Can we go to the museum instead? Nathan's heart caught. Absolutely, he said. Next week, the museum. And just like that, he was invited back. Not with fanfare, not with a dramatic reveal, but with a question from a 6-year-old who was starting to believe he might stick around. A week had passed since the quiet afternoon in the library, and something had shifted between them all. An invisible thread of trust beginning to weave itself through the days. Nathan found himself checking his phone not for meetings or investment updates, but for Elena's texts, short updates about the boys, photos of Jonah's latest drawing, or a question about whether Nathan would be free after school on Thursday. Thursday came with rain. It wasn't the kind of gentle drizzle that you could ignore, but a relentless downpour that soaked through jackets and flattened hair. Nathan arrived early outside the boys' school, umbrella in one hand, 3 identical yellow raincoats in the other. Ones he'd bought after Elena mentioned how the boys always argued about whose coat was whose. When the bell rang, the flood of students came spilling out, and he spotted them at once. Eli looked up and grinned when he saw the coats. You actually brought them, he said, sounding both surprised and impressed. Genius idea, huh? Nathan replied, handing each of them their designated size. No more sharing sleeves. Luca rolled his eyes, but took the coat. Jonah slipped his on without a word and tucked himself under Nathan's umbrella, close enough that Nathan could feel the boy's hand brush his. We still going to the museum? Jonah asked. Absolutely. Rain makes it better. Fewer people. The Museum of Natural History was a short walk and a perfect haven from the storm. Inside, it was warm and humming with quiet energy. They wandered past towering dinosaur skeletons and into a room filled with glowing gemstones. Jonah lingered at a meteorite, his fingers barely grazing the polished surface. Do you think it remembers where it came from? He asked. Nathan blinked, surprised by the question. Maybe, he said. I think it carries a piece of its past with it, just like we do. Jonah didn't say anything, but he didn't walk away either. They made their way to the Hall of the Universe, where a planetarium show was just beginning. The boys huddled close together in their seats. When the lights dimmed, Nathan felt Eli's elbow brush his. He turned to see the boy holding out a piece of popcorn from the snack Nathan had snuck in. Don't tell the museum staff, Eli whispered. I'll take it to the grave, Nathan replied. The show was a gentle cascade of stars and science, narration about the expanding cosmos and the delicate balance of forces that held the universe together. Nathan, a man who had spent most of his life calculating success in quarterly returns and IPO forecasts, felt something in him stretch in that darkened dome. Something humbler, something infinitely more human. Afterward, they walked through the exhibits with the quiet reverence reserved for spaces that inspire awe. Luca found a display about the early tools of human civilization and read every placard out loud. Jonah took sketches in a tiny notebook he'd brought. Eli asked questions Nathan couldn't always answer, but instead of bluffing, he said, "Let's look it up together later." That seemed to satisfy him more than any confident answer might have. Later, at the museum cafe, with rain still tapping at the windows, they sat in a corner booth sharing fries and grilled cheese sandwiches. Elena had agreed to meet them there after finishing work, and when she arrived, she found them mid-discussion about whether a comet or a black hole would win in a cosmic showdown. They're different with you, she said, sliding into the booth beside Nathan once the boys had turned their attention to dessert. More light somehow? I don't know what I'm doing half the time, Nathan admitted. I'm just trying not to mess it up. You haven't, she said softly. Not yet. Her gaze held his for a second longer than necessary, then broke when Jonah announced that he'd drawn a comet swallowing a black hole. Just for fun, it was close to evening when they left, stepping out into a now cleared sky. The boys ran ahead, puddle jumping, shouting at each other about whether or not stars made noise when they exploded. Elena and Nathan followed behind slowly, neither of them speaking for a while. You ever think, she said eventually, that maybe life doesn't give you second chances? It just waits for you to wake up to the first one? Nathan nodded. I think I'm just starting to understand that. When they reached the brownstone, Jonah doubled back and grabbed Nathan's hand. You're coming next week too, right? If you want me, Nathan said. Jonah didn't answer. He just nodded once, firm and sure, before disappearing up the stairs. Elena lingered on the stoop. Same time next Thursday? Nathan didn't hesitate. Count on it. As she turned to go inside, Nathan stood for a moment in the cooling air, watching the light in the window flick on. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for once, he wasn't planning his next move by market metrics. He was learning to measure his worth by different stars entirely. The wind had a different bite now. Autumn had crept into Cambridge with crisp mornings and golden leaves crunching underfoot. The trees lining the narrow streets began shedding their summer fullness, and with every passing week, Nathan found himself more embedded in rhythms that had nothing to do with stock tickers or international flights. It was a Wednesday evening when Elena called, her voice carrying a tension Nathan hadn't heard in weeks. Luca's teacher called. There's a school project, family heritage. He has to present something. From your side, Nathan froze for a moment. My side, he told his class that his dad is an entrepreneur who builds things with computers, which, while not wrong, led to a few more questions. What did you say? I said we'd talk about it together. By Thursday afternoon, he was sitting at their modest dining table, a manila folder under his arm. The triplets crowded around him, each with construction paper and colored markers ready for use. Elena leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watchful, but not intervening. So, Nathan began, clearing his throat, my grandfather came from Glasgow, worked on ships, real rough hands, big laugh. He used to tell me stories about hiding in the engine rooms just to escape chores. Did you ever meet him? Eli asked. When I was about your age, Nathan said. He made me a toy boat out of driftwood. Didn't work. Sank like a rock. But I thought it was magic. Jonah started sketching as Nathan spoke. A small boy holding a blocky boat, his hair wine-tossed, grinning like he didn't know it would sink. What about your parents? Luca asked, his voice curious but hesitant. Nathan hesitated. My dad was in finance. Big city man. Suits, briefcases, long days. He didn't talk much unless it was about numbers. Like you? Jonah asked, eyes darting up from the paper. Nathan let out a short breath. I was, for a long time. I guess I learned to be more like him than I meant to. And your mom? Eli added quietly. She was kind. Taught piano lessons from our living room. She passed away when I was in college. No one said anything for a moment. Then Jonah passed him the drawing. That's you, with your grandpa's boat. Nathan took it slowly, the edges slightly smudged. Something tightened in his chest. You know, Luca said, focused on gluing pictures to his trifold board. It's kind of weird. I always thought people had to grow up with their dads to call them family. But maybe you don't. Why do you say that? Nathan asked. Luca shrugged. You didn't grow up with us, but you still know things, like how to fold paper airplanes so they actually fly, how to explain stars, and how to find the perfect cinnamon rolls. Eli piped up. You helped me with fractions. I'm still mad you didn't help me with mine, Jonah added, trying to sound grumpy, but smiling. Nathan chuckled, heart swelling. Next time I'll help with all three. Promise. They worked for another hour, constructing their presentations. Nathan helped them print old photos from Elna's family albums and scoured his laptop for anything from his own past. A photo of his childhood home. A picture of him, age 12, holding a fishing pole with a lopsided grin. A scan of his mother's handwritten recipe for lemon cake. When Elena came in to check on them, she found all four seated on the living room floor, surrounded by clippings, glue sticks, and history both old and newly created. Later, after the boys had gone to bed, Nathan lingered. They stood together in the kitchen again, this time over mugs of chamomile tea instead of coffee. The silence between them was softer now, familiar. I never told you, Elena said suddenly, why I didn't try harder to find you when I found out I was pregnant. Nathan turned toward her, letting her speak. I did try, at first. But then I saw the headlines, the interviews, the features about your expansion into Singapore. And I remembered the version of you who said he couldn't be tied down because the world was waiting. I was wrong, Nathan said simply. I know, she replied, and maybe I was wrong too, for thinking I had to do it alone. He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could hear the change in his breath. You didn't do it alone, Elena. You carried all the weight. And now you don't have to anymore. She looked up at him, eyes wet with something unspoken. What if I mess it up? He whispered. What if this version of me, dad, partner, imperfect man, isn't enough? She placed her hand lightly over his. Then we figure it out. Together. The quiet held for a long time. Outside, the leaves rustled. Somewhere above, stars that had witnessed generations still watched in silence. Inside, a man once defined by margins and markets began to understand something far greater. That legacy was not about what he built with code or capital. It was about what he showed up for, who he chose to become in the lives of those who needed him most. Nathan stood beneath the canopy of maple trees at the edge of Franklin Elementary's small auditorium, clutching 3 identical bouquets of wildflowers, one for each of his sons. It was Friday evening, and inside, the school buzzed with excitement. Laughter and the rustle of programs filled the narrow hallways, where parents huddled near folding chairs and students darted past in a blur of excitement and nervousness. Tonight was the school's autumn showcase. Luca was reciting a poem. Jonah had painted a mural being displayed in the art room. Eli, the most reserved of the 3, had been practicing a solo piece on the keyboard for weeks. Nathan hadn't missed a single rehearsal. He checked his watch. 20 minutes early. Again. These days, he'd rather wait in silence than risk being even a second too late. That lesson had etched itself deeply into him after nearly missing Ethan's hospital discharge weeks ago, and the memory of Caleb's disappointed face still stung when work once pulled him away during the museum trip. This time, there would be no interruptions. Inside the auditorium, Elena greeted him with a warm but slightly amused smile. "You beat us here," she whispered, glancing at his hands. "And with flowers. I read somewhere kids secretly love that kind of thing," Nathan murmured, smiling, eyes scanning for the triplets. "Where are they?" "Backstage. Eli's nervous. Do you think he'll go through with it?" "I think he needs to see you in the front row," she said gently. "And then he'll believe he can." They took their seats together, side by side, in a row near the middle. The crowd began to settle as the lights dimmed, and a teacher stepped forward to welcome everyone. Nathan barely heard the opening words. His mind was on Eli, behind the curtain, likely fiddling with his sleeves or second-guessing his song. Nathan closed his eyes and made a silent promise to himself. "I'm here. No matter what happens next, I'm here." The performances unfolded in quick succession. A dance number from the first graders, a rousing choral performance from the 5th grade. Then came Jonah's class. His mural, projected onto the screen behind them, depicted a whimsical version of their neighborhood, complete with flying books and jelly bean-colored trees. Nathan caught his son's shy grin as the audience clapped and nudged Elena. "That's his dream version of our block," she said. "He told me he added a rocket launcher on our roof." "Of course he did," Nathan whispered, chuckling. Luca's poem was next. He stood tall, his voice clear, his delivery full of emotion. Nathan felt a lump rise in his throat as Luca read the last line. "Family is not who stays from the start. It's who shows up when it matters most." Their eyes met across the auditorium. Luca didn't smile, but he nodded, almost imperceptibly, and it hit Nathan harder than any applause ever had. Then came the moment he'd been waiting for. Eli stepped onto the stage, small, solemn, and carrying a quiet intensity that seemed too large for someone his size. He sat at the keyboard, adjusted the bench like he'd rehearsed a dozen times, and took a deep breath. For a beat, the room held its breath with him. Then his fingers began to move. The melody was gentle, almost hesitant at first. But as he continued, confidence grew in the way he touched each note. His back straightened, his timing sharpened, and something extraordinary began to unfold. By the second minute, there wasn't a whisper in the crowd. Parents, students, teachers, everyone leaned forward. And Nathan, he sat motionless, heart pounding, barely breathing. The piece wasn't perfect, but it was brave, and it was beautiful. When Eli finished, there was a long moment of silence before the auditorium erupted into applause. Nathan stood immediately, clapping with a kind of reverence he never knew he could feel for anything outside his world of achievement. Eli found him through the crowd. Nathan raised one of the flower bouquets, lifting it high like a beacon. Eli didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just blinked, then nodded, much like his brother had earlier, and turned to leave the stage. That night, back at Elena's house, the boys were giddy with leftover adrenaline. Jonah rehashed every laugh from his mural. Luca announced that 3 parents had cried during his poem. And Eli sat beside Nathan on the couch, legs tucked under him, holding the flowers in his lap. "Did I mess up the third part?" he asked suddenly. Nathan shook his head. "You didn't mess up anything. You moved an entire room." Eli looked down at the petals. "I kept thinking I was going to mess up. But then I saw you." Nathan swallowed. "I will always be there. I mean that. Even when you have work?" "Even then." Elena watched from the kitchen, leaning against the counter. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. This was no longer a story of visits and effort. It was something more, something rooted. After the boys went to bed, Nathan lingered. The house felt different now, familiar. "I cleared my schedule next week," he said quietly. "I've postponed the San Diego summit." Elena looked at him. "For what?" "For nothing. For dinners, homework, breathing room. I don't want to keep showing up only in highlights. I want to be part of the in-between." She said nothing for a while. Then finally, with a softness in her voice, she replied, "You already are." Nathan stood on the front steps as she walked him out. The air was cooler now, the kind of cool that whispers of winter ahead. He turned back for a moment and looked at the light spilling from the windows. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He was going to return, and not just as a visitor. He was building something, not an empire this time, a life. Sunday morning began with the soft tapping of rain against the kitchen window. The house was unusually quiet, save for the sound of scrambled eggs sizzling in the pan and the occasional shuffle of socked feet on hardwood floors. Nathan stood at the stove, spatula in hand, still wearing the old gray sweatshirt Luca had lent him the night before after a spontaneous Nerf war turned into a sleepover none of them wanted to end. It wasn't planned. He hadn't packed anything. But after the boys begged for just one night, and Elena saw the warmth in their eyes, she had simply nodded. Nathan slept on the couch, a blanket draped over him by small hands sometime during the night. It was the kind of quiet presence he hadn't known he needed until it was right there. He had always been a man of plans, structured, efficient, controlled. But this? Making pancakes in a too-small kitchen, elbow to elbow, with 3 6-year-olds arguing over syrup flavors? This was chaos. Glorious, tender chaos. Jonah appeared first, yawning, dragging his stuffed tiger behind him. "Morning, buddy," Nathan greeted. Jonah climbed onto the stool. "Did you make the eggs too runny again?" Nathan chuckled. "I had a sous chef critique dream last night. Guess that was you." Moments later, Luca joined, already clutching a library book he hadn't let go of since Thursday. Can we go to the museum today? Which one? Nathan asked. The one with the dinosaurs, but not just for looking. They have a behind-the-scenes tour. I checked. And they have a planetarium, Ethan chimed in from the stairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes. That's where I want to go. Elena entered the room mid-discussion, brushing a hand through her tousled hair. Are we really debating museums at 7 a.m.? Yes, Luca and Jonah said in unison. Nathan turned to her with a grin. I don't suppose you'd let me steal them for the day. She raised an eyebrow. The entire day? They promised to test my dinosaur trivia and let me buy bad cafeteria food. Elena looked at the boys, then at Nathan. If you promise to return them in one piece and full of stories. That day, Nathan discovered something extraordinary. He wasn't just getting to know his sons. He was rediscovering himself through them. Jonah's questions weren't just cute, they were curious. Eli's quiet observations weren't shy. They were sharp. Luca's endless imagination wasn't a phase. It was a window into a world Nathan had forgotten how to access. At the museum, they moved through exhibits like explorers. At the planetarium, Ethan clutched Nathan's hand during the star show, whispering constellations he remembered from their bedtime stories. At lunch, Caleb, still cautious but warming, offered Nathan half of his chocolate milk carton without prompting. Only because I'm full, he said coolly. But Nathan heard what he meant. You belong with us. By the end of the day, the boys were asleep in the back seat of Nathan's SUV. Museum maps curled in their laps, leftover popcorn in paper bags at their feet. He drove slowly, not because of traffic, but because he didn't want the day to end. Back at Elena's, she opened the door to the sight of Nathan carrying Luca in one arm and guiding the other two in gently. Long day? She asked softly. Perfectly long. She helped them inside, whispering thanks as they settled the boys into their rooms. And when the house was quiet again, she poured 2 mugs of tea and joined Nathan on the front porch. I haven't seen them this connected, this happy, in a long time, she said. They give me more than I know how to give back. She tilted her head. You're giving them exactly what they need. Consistency, presence, safety. Nathan took a long sip, then turned toward her. I've been thinking about something more long-term. Elena looked cautious, but didn't speak. What if I created a space at my place? A room just for them, with their things, their books, their toys, so that when they're there, it's not visiting. It's theirs too. Elena didn't answer right away. She looked up at the quiet sky, where the rain had finally stopped, leaving the air smelling of wet grass and possibility. You mean that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. I think that would mean the world to them. And to me. The porch fell into a comfortable silence. For the first time, they weren't talking as former lovers navigating a complicated reunion. They were speaking as partners. Different, perhaps, but united by a love larger than their history. Nathan stood to leave, but before walking down the steps, he paused and turned. Elena? Yes? I've never felt more like myself than I have in the last few weeks. You gave me the chance, and I'm not going anywhere. She smiled, tired but soft, and in her eyes was the fragile trust that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't temporary. Nathan walked to his car, under a sky clearing slowly, stars peeking out one by one. In a world he once built alone, something new had taken root, not a return to the past, but the beginning of something deeper, wider, and lasting. He drove away not from them, but toward the life he was finally ready to live. The late autumn sun cast a golden light over the neighborhood, catching the fading leaves in bursts of amber and rust. Nathan stood on the sidewalk in front of Elena's home, holding a folded sheet of paper in his hand. It was wrinkled at the corners, soft from being opened and closed too many times that week. On it was a list, meticulously written in different colored markers, complete with small doodles. At the top, what we want in our room at Dad's place. It wasn't a request, it was a declaration of trust. He stepped inside just as the boys came racing to the door. Luca reached him first, arms flung wide. "Did you get the rocket wallpaper?" "Yes," Nathan smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "And the glow-in-the-dark stars. And the bookshelf you drew." Ethan tugged at his sleeve. "And the corner reading light? The one that bends?" "Already installed." Caleb lingered behind his brothers, quieter, more watchful, as always. But when Nathan caught his eye, he gave the smallest nod, a silent approval that meant more than any words. Elena emerged from the kitchen, a dish towel in hand, her expression soft but cautious. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "I'm not sure of much," Nathan replied, "but I'm sure of them." That afternoon, the transition began. They didn't call it moving in. Not yet. It was setting up camp, trying it out, just for weekends. All phrases that allowed space for change. But everyone knew it was more than that. Nathan's once immaculate penthouse had transformed. Gone were the sterile surfaces and sharp corners. In their place, a hallway filled with laughter, scattered sneakers, a refrigerator adorned with magnets, and 3 rooms that each reflected a piece of the boys' personalities. Luca's had a telescope by the window and a ceiling painted like the night sky. Ethan's held a wall map of the solar system and a desk covered in little science kits. Caleb's, the most personal of all, featured shelves filled with sketchbooks and a record player Nathan had found in an old shop downtown, alongside a collection of vintage vinyl with gentle piano and classical scores. Caleb's eyes lit up when he saw it, though he said nothing. That night, they had their first official sleepover in the new space. Nathan made spaghetti, burning the garlic bread, and watched cartoons sprawled on the living room floor, with them, until they all fell asleep in a tangle of blankets and limbs. By Monday morning, the space wasn't just prepared for them, it belonged to them. At school, during drop-off, Caleb hesitated before getting out of the car. "Nathan?" he asked, his voice unusually small. "Yeah? You're not just doing this so we like you more, right?" The question wasn't innocent. It was heavy with the weight of a boy who'd known the ache of absence. Nathan leaned closer, his voice gentle. "No, Caleb. I'm doing this because I love you, because I want to be part of your life. Not sometimes. All the time." Caleb didn't say anything, but when he stepped out of the car, he turned back and gave Nathan a look that said he was starting to believe it. Later that week, a new chapter unfolded. Elena had invited her parents to visit again. The last time had ended in cautious truce. This time, Nathan hoped for something more. He didn't expect forgiveness, but maybe understanding. When Thomas and Evelyn stepped into Nathan's apartment that Saturday, they were greeted not by luxury, but by warmth. The boys gave a spirited tour, leading their grandparents from room to room, showing off their spaces, their treasures, their artwork. Nathan watched from a distance, heart thudding, until Evelyn approached him. "They seem happy," she said carefully. "They're my whole world," Nathan said. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm not leaving again. I've built something here. Not just this place, a life with them." Thomas remained reserved, but there was something different in his handshake when they said goodbye. Not approval, but less resistance. Maybe that was enough for now. That evening, as Elena and Nathan sat quietly on the balcony, watching the city light flicker into the dark, she turned to him. "They're becoming more themselves," she said. "And you're becoming someone I didn't expect. Someone better." He reached for her hand, not pushing, just steady. "I'm not trying to rewrite the past," Nathan said, "but I want to write the rest of the story. With you. With them." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't let go of his hand either. In the silence between them, something unspoken shifted. A door opened, not wide, but enough to step through. For the first time, Nathan wasn't chasing a version of success he could hold in numbers or accolades. He was building something slower, something deeper, and this time, he knew. If it wasn't built with them in it, it wasn't worth building at all. Winter crept into Manhattan quietly, softening the city's sharp edges with flurries of snow and a hush that seemed to slow even the most hurried steps. Nathan Carter stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office at Carter Technologies, watching the first flakes settle onto the skyline. He wasn't thinking about the upcoming investor summit or the projected revenue growth for the quarter. He was thinking about a piano recital. The clock on the wall read 4:07 p.m. Caleb's solo performance would begin at 6:30 sharp. His team had tried to book him into a late afternoon board review. He'd refused. This time, there would be no excuses. By 5 lagger, Nathan had left the building. His assistant watched him go, shaking her head in disbelief. A year ago, such a move would have been unimaginable. But now, it was part of something bigger. That evening, the school auditorium was filled with warmth. Parents chatted over programs. Teachers organized eager performers backstage, and the scent of fresh cookies from the bake sale table lingered in the air. Nathan found a seat in the front row. Elena arrived moments later with Luca and Ethan in tow, both practically vibrating with excitement. "Is Caleb ready?" Nathan asked. "He's nervous," Elena said with a soft smile. "But he said something on the way here. He said, 'Dad always keeps his promises now.'" Nathan's breath caught. He turned toward the stage, blinking fast. The lights dimmed. One by one, small children performed. Some confidently, others hesitantly. Each met with enthusiastic applause. Then came Caleb. He walked slowly to the piano, his posture stiff, fingers twitching at his side. Nathan leaned forward, just as their son's eyes searched the audience. When they landed on him, Nathan smiled and raised both thumbs in silent support. Caleb gave the smallest nod. Then he played. The melody, simple and haunting, filled the auditorium. Each note felt deliberate, tender, brave. There were stumbles, a few missed keys, but Caleb didn't stop. He played through the fear, through the nerves, until the final note hung in the air like a held breath. Applause broke out, loud and unrestrained. Caleb turned, eyes wide, scanning the crowd until he found Nathan again. That smile, shy but proud, melted every piece of Nathan's heart that had once been too hardened by ambition. After the recital, the boys swarmed Nathan with stories, laughter, and plans for a celebratory dinner. Caleb clutched a small bouquet of white roses that Nathan had handed him backstage. "These were Mom's favorite, weren't they?" he asked. Nathan nodded. "And now they're yours too." Back home, Elena lingered in the kitchen while Nathan helped the boys change into their pajamas. She stared at the fridge. Once sterile, now covered in drawings, field trip permission slips, and one crooked photo of the five of them at a science museum. When Nathan returned, she was still standing there. "They're happy," she said, almost to herself. "It's not perfect, but it's real." Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I don't want perfect," he said softly. "I just want this." She turned, looked up at him, and for the first time in years, kissed him. Not out of nostalgia, not out of shared history, but out of something entirely new. Hope. Spring would arrive in time, but for now, the warmth between them was enough. Months passed, and Carter Technologies transformed, in step with its founder. The company's culture shifted from endless hustle to something far more sustainable. Flex hours, family support programs, on-site childcare. At the grand opening of the company's new Family First Innovation Center, Nathan stood at the podium, not as a CEO, trying to impress shareholders, but as a father trying to honor a promise. "Success is no longer measured by the size of our buildings," he said, "but by whether our people get home in time to tuck their children into bed." The applause was thunderous. Later that day, Luca, Ethan, and Caleb gave their grandparents a tour of the new facility, pointing out everything from the music room to the planetarium Nathan had insisted on including. For Ethan, Elena walked beside Nathan as they watched their boys run ahead. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" she asked. "I used to," he said, "but not anymore, because this—" He gestured toward the chaos, the laughter, the movement. "This is everything." Their hands met, fingers entwining easily now, as they stood in the heart of a space built not just for work, but for family. Nathan knew that the story wasn't over. In many ways, it had only just begun. He had once built an empire on strategy and sacrifice. Now, he was building a legacy on something far stronger: love. And he was finally wholly, beautifully proud of the man he had become. Nathan Carter's journey was never meant to follow a predictable path. At the pinnacle of professional achievement, revered in boardrooms and celebrated in business circles, he had everything the world told him he should want. But life, in its quiet defiance of plans, interrupted his meticulously structured existence with three small boys, a woman from his past, and a truth he never saw coming. What began as a shocking encounter on a bustling Manhattan street outside a grocery store became the doorway to a profound transformation. The man who once measured success in revenue charts and global expansion had to learn what it meant to show up, not as a CEO, but as a father, a co-parent, a man willing to trade board meetings for bedtime stories and billion-dollar deals for school recitals. We watched as Nathan faltered, missing moments, making missteps, and realizing that ambition without connection is just an echo in an empty room. But we also witnessed the beauty of change, of second chances, of a man choosing to rebuild relationships he never knew he'd lost. It wasn't easy. Trust had to be earned. Walls had to be gently dismantled. The love between a father and his sons didn't come instantly. It was forged in small gestures, honest conversations, and moments where he chose family over fortune. And alongside that growth, something unexpected bloomed: hope. between Nathan and Elena. What had once been broken didn't just mend, it evolved. Through shared parenting, late night talks, and witnessing Nathan's unwavering commitment, they found something deeper than what they had before: the choice to love, not by default, but with intention. By the end, Nathan didn't just transform his personal life, he changed the culture of his entire company, proving that compassion and connection are not threats to success. They are its most powerful foundation. Nathan's story teaches us a timeless truth, one that is often forgotten in a world that glorifies busyness. The greatest investments we'll ever make are in the people we love. Success without someone to share it with is incomplete. And showing up for your children, your partner, your family, that's not weakness, that's legacy. So ask yourself, what are you building your life around? Is there space in your ambition for love, laughter, and presence? Because sometimes the most meaningful milestones aren't measured in titles or trophies, but in smiles, in quiet moments, in knowing you chose what mattered most. What was the turning point for Nathan Carter in this story? A. Closing his biggest international deal. B. Attending Caleb's piano recital and seeing him smile. Type your answer in the comments, A or B, and tell us why you chose it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Nathan's story moved you the most? What does your version of success look like? Drop your reflections in the comments so others can be inspired too. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to support the channel. Your encouragement helps us bring more powerful, emotional stories to life. See you in the next one.